There are days when the feeling in Foxborough is not just about news dropping. It feels like real movement. And that is exactly the kind of day that hits this fan base hard. Because when you put together draft debate, offensive firepower, big decisions around Drake Maye's targets, and defensive pieces that could toughen up this team, it is impossible to look at all of it and not feel like the Patriots are trying to push this rebuild into a different gear. Hit that like button and stay with me to the end because today's conversation is not light. Today's conversation is about choices that could change the direction of this season. The first thing I feel when I look at this run game conversation is simple. The Patriots cannot act like they are fully covered just because they have two strong names at the top. Travion Henderson came alive at the right time. Ramondre Stevenson looked a lot better after the bye, and that gave the fan base real hope, for good reason. But long seasons expose teams that lean too heavily on a thin foundation. Antonio Gibson got knocked out of the picture after the injury. D'Ernest Johnson is gone. Elijah Mitchell comes with a long injury history, and the other names are still living more in the promise zone than the proven zone. And for a team trying to protect Drake Maye's development, that matters. That is where Jonah Coleman starts making a lot of sense to me. Not as a throwaway pick, not as some random name to fill out a draft class. As a player who actually fits a real need. He has production. He runs with no fear. He can handle volume. He catches the ball. And he brings something coaches always value when they are shaping a young offense. Quarterback protection. For this Patriots team right now, that means a lot. Because it is not enough to run well in October. You have to survive third down, late blitzes, tempo changes, and those snaps where the back has to solve the problem without drawing attention to himself. What really pulls me into this projection is the fit. Coleman does not feel like a limited specialist. He can split work. He can play in passing situations. He might even open the door as a return option if the staff sees that role for him. When a prospect gives you running, receiving, pass protection, and hints at special teams value too, that stops being a footnote and starts becoming a strong roster argument. And honestly, I like this kind of move because it strengthens the offense without fake noise. While a lot of people only look at the flashy name, the Patriots also need this kind of addition that supports the plan behind the headlines. If Foxborough is really thinking about a backfield that is tougher, more flexible, and more trustworthy, then Jonah Coleman feels like the kind of pick that starts quietly and ends up looking necessary. Now the conversation changes tone because this is where the Patriots face the kind of choice that splits the fan base almost instantly. Pick 31 is not where you can afford to misread the board, and when Zion Young gets brought up as a possibility for New England, the reaction comes hard from both sides. Some people immediately say, "How are you passing on a tackle again when protecting Drake Maye is supposed to be the priority?" I get that, I really do. But I also look at this defense and see a problem this fan base is tired of watching. There is not enough consistent edge presence. There is not enough pressure that can wreck an offense without needing the perfect call every single time. If the top offensive tackles are really gone by 31, then the conversation stops being about the ideal and starts being about the answer. And in that scenario, Zion Young does not feel like a reach. He feels like a logical swing. He has NFL size. He plays with power. He brings contact. He holds up well against the run. And he brings an edge to the field that jumps off the report and onto the tape. Missouri moved him around, standing up, hand in the dirt, heavy usage. That matters for a defense that needs players who can step in without shrinking the package. The sack total might be where some of the pushback comes from, and I cannot blame anybody for that. 6.5 sacks last season is not the kind of number that makes the whole room explode. But not every pass rusher enters the league as a finished product. Sometimes what the staff is betting on is the raw material, the trench violence, the length, the competitiveness, the chance to sharpen the technique and turn pressure into production. And when the profile says intense captain, strong against the run, and still room to grow, that sounds exactly like the kind of defender New England usually values. So for me, the real issue is not whether Zion Young is a flashy name. It is whether the Patriots are willing to attack a real weakness, even when the board makes life messy. If the tackles are gone early, I am not calling that pick a detour. I am calling it a firm response to a need that also affects this team's future. Because protecting Drake Maye matters. Of course it does. But making the opposing quarterback feel the game collapse around him is part of the path back to real strength in Foxborough too. This one hits me a different way because now we are not just talking about trade value, roster movement, or asset management. We are talking about connection. And when Kayshon Boutte's name starts showing up in trade conversations while the Patriots still circle that dream of landing A.J. Brown, the fan base feels a real conflict. Because one thing is wanting more firepower in the offense. Another is being totally fine with the idea of losing a player who grew alongside Drake Maye and helped give this passing game some identity. Boutte did not become a fan favorite by accident. He became one because he kept earning more space, more answers, more respect. After a rough start to his time in New England, he did not disappear. He kept growing. He kept showing up. He kept turning flashes into more consistent production. And when a receiver gives you back-to-back 500-yard seasons, increases his touchdown production, and shows real chemistry with a young quarterback, that is not just roster depth. That is something you protect. That is why I think it is dangerous to treat Boutte like he is easily replaceable. Romeo Doubs is in. Mac Hollins is in the room. Mario Douglas is still a useful weapon. Fine. The room has more options now. But chemistry is not something you order in a box. You do not build it by pressing a button. Drake Maye has already shown trust in Boutte on deep balls, timing throws, and shared feel on plays that stress a defense. When your quarterback naturally talks about going back to that target because the connection works, I pay attention. And I think the staff should too. If A.J. Brown is still a real possibility after the draft and closer to June, then yes, the conversation gets bigger. A receiver like that changes coverage, changes defensive respect, changes the ceiling of the offense. But in my view, that should make the Patriots want to keep Boutte even more, not less. Imagine that offense with a dominant target pulling attention on one side and a receiver who is already in sync with Maye, hurting defenses on the other. That is real compliment. That is an offense starting to make opponents uncomfortable. So I am going to be direct with the fan base here. If Boutte gets moved just because another move might be out there, I think that is bad business. If he has to be part of an unavoidable package for a massive name, then that is a different conversation. But moving him just to move him, right when he has matured and the chemistry with the quarterback is starting to bloom, would mean weakening a part of the offense that finally started to get a real face. And Foxborough needs to stack certainties, not give them away too early. And now we get to the kind of possibility that changes the whole feel inside the draft room, because now we are not just talking about making a good pick at 31, we are talking about the guts to move up the board if the Patriots see a player who can change the shape of the defense right away. And that is where Dillon Thieneman really grabs attention. Not just because the athletic numbers are strong, because they are, but because of the kind of security and range he could bring to a secondary that needs to get intimidating again on the back end. Thieneman has speed, fast eyes, and the kind of range that jumps out fast. This is the type of safety who can live deep without looking late to the play, and that changes a lot for a defense. It changes how you disguise coverage. It changes how you free other defenders to attack. It even changes how the offense decides to challenge you. When a player has the instincts to close space and get to the football with that kind of burst, he is not just entering the rotation. He is stepping in with a real chance to change behavior on the other side. What also matters to me is that we are not talking about an empty athlete. His track record shows production, leadership, and durability. 39 games, 39 starts. No missed time because of injury. Impact at Purdue and at Oregon. That means a lot in an evaluation process, especially for a team that has to identify players who are reliable, ready for responsibility, and capable of growing inside a demanding structure. When you add instinct, speed, experience, and leadership, the name stops feeling just interesting. It starts feeling serious. Of course, there are limits in the profile. He is not the biggest safety in the class. He can feel some of those more physical matchups near the line. He does not always come downhill with the cleanest angle. That is part of an honest discussion about the player. But the ceiling of influence is still high because today's football punishes defenses that do not have range, processing, and recovery speed. And Thieneman gives you exactly that kind of package that can make a coordinator more aggressive and a defense less vulnerable in space. If he slips into a range where moving up becomes realistic, I would absolutely understand the Patriots looking hard at it. Because in some years, you do not move up on impulse. You move up on conviction. And when the defense has a chance to land a player with center field range, versatility, and the ability to play a ton of snaps early, that math gets very tempting. So let me throw this to the fan base. If Dillon Thieneman starts sliding and New England sees a chance to go get him before 31, would you hit the gas and move up? Or would you stay put and use those picks on other needs? Because that kind of decision says a lot about whether Foxborough wants to just patch holes or actually raise the ceiling of this defense. At the end of it all, what stays with me is one clear feeling. The Patriots are starting to look at their own problems with more ambition. A stronger backfield, more aggression on defense, protecting Drake Maye's chemistry, and the chance to go hunt high-end talent in the draft without fear. None of that guarantees anything by itself, but it changes the weight of what comes next. Because when Foxborough starts stacking pieces with logic and personality, the rebuild stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like a response. And I honestly do not think the league understands yet what might be building here. Subscribe to the channel and come back tomorrow.